Hello everyone. So again we are starting with online mode, and from today's lecture we are going to start with the new chapter under the subject Health Education and Community Pharmacy. The name of the chapter is Demography and Family Planning. Now first of all we must know the definition. Many times definition is asked of demography. Simply, I will tell you the meaning of demography, that it is the study of human population, isn't it? Now, as one of the definition is displayed on your screen, the demography is the study of human populations in relation to the changes brought about by interplay of births, deaths, and migration. Now, another appropriate definition, we can say that demography is a science which deals with study of all aspects of population progress, that is welfare, birth in a family, death in a family, age and number of children in family, number of school going children, their educational qualification, any sickness, any deformity in a family, isn't it? So it also includes the study of standard of living, isn't it? The other name for demography is population dynamics also, or simply we can say population studies. So under demography, only regarding human population study can be carried out and their data can be estimated. We can get the statistical data of any area, of any country, isn't it? Of any state, isn't it? So we can get the demographic data in figures also, isn't it? Now this is the meaning which will help you to understand the word demography. So demo means the people and graphy means measurement. So a sort of the calculation you can say, or determination is carried out of the human population, isn't it? So demography meaning the measurement or the estimation of human population. Now, demographics are the quantifiable statistics of a given population. So, there are so many agencies, government agencies, isn't it, which carry out the determination also, isn't it? And they carry out this vital, you can say, process of the figures. Then, the importance. What is the importance of demographic data? So whatever this data we get, isn't it? It is in the figures, isn't it? So these whatever the demographic studies are there, they provide the statistical data, isn't it? And by that the population of any country can be determined, birth rate can be determined, death rate can be determined, isn't it? So the difference between the birth and death rate will give the addition of net population every year. That also can be determined. Then what is the ratio of married and unmarried, men women ratio, isn't it? Then this is the importance that we get the idea about the nourishment and undernourishment data also. We also can find out the literacy rate also, isn't it, from these figures, the density of population. Like we know that the most of the metropolitan cities, they are very dense. The population of metropolitan cities is more as compared to rural areas or villages, isn't it? Also we get the bifurcation of the urban area as well as rural area also. We also can determine the religious composition also, isn't it? So this is the importance. The health status of community, depends upon dynamic relationship between number of people, their composition and distribution, isn't it? So planning of health services also can be done, isn't it, by these demographic variables, isn't it? So for example, nowadays also we can see that present example of vaccination that is carried out, isn't it, of corona against corona disease. So initially only senior citizens were vaccinated, isn't it? So taking into consideration the population of the country, the vaccination program started were covering only senior citizens. Now from 1st of April, the age group in between 45 years age to 60 years of age, they are also going to be vaccinated, isn't it? So in this fashion, about the health services also planning can be done, or whatever the resources are there. So whatever the resources available are there, how they can be divided in the population, for this also demographic data is beneficial. The elements of demography, isn't it? Elements of demography, isn't it? So the size of population may either increase or decrease. Then composition according to the age, or sorry, sex, that is male and female, isn't it? Now the next important topic is demographic cycle. Many a times question is asked on demographic cycle also, isn't it? Now this cycle is giving us the idea about the growth of population of any country that is taking place, is according to the various stages as they are given in this demographic cycle. Now most of the population, isn't it, in the world, isn't it, it is in developing countries. So near about 80% population we can say of the world that is living in developing countries. Only 20% population that is living in developed countries, whatever the western countries are there, isn't it? Now the growth of this population that is taking place according to this cycle, any of the stage, isn't it? Five stages are there. Now the name of these five stages you must know. First is high stationary stage, then early expanding stage, late expanding stage, low stationary stage, and declining stage, isn't it? Now, the growth of population will take place according to any of the following stage, isn't it? Now, how it is taking place, one by one stage, you must try to understand, isn't it? Now, in every stage, isn't it? It will reflect the percentage, you can say, of birth rate and death rate. So, in this slide, you can easily understand, isn't it, that there is the change taking place in birth rate and death rate, isn't it? The very first stage is high stationary stage. This is the first stage during which the population remains constant or stationary. You can see that birth rate and death rate both are same, isn't it? Okay. Now when both are same, that means high stationary, it means there is high birth rate also as well as high death rate also. So there will be no any change in the population. It will neither increase nor it will decrease, isn't it? And therefore population will remain constant. So now our country in 1920 was in this stage, isn't it? Okay. Then second stage is early expanding stage. Now this is the second stage during which the death rate begins to fall. You will see the arrow that is given in death rate, isn't it? So arrow is downward, that means the death rate is low, but whatever the birth rate is there, that is unchanged. It is increasing, isn't it? So most of the developing countries, they fall under early expanding stage. That means the population growth of those countries is according to early expanding stage. For example, South Africa and Africa, isn't it? Now the third stage is late expanding stage. Now late expanding stage you have to understand very carefully. It is the third stage in which the birth rate decreases, isn't it? Okay, birth rate decreases, but still the population continues to increase, isn't it? Why? Because the birth rate is still higher than the death rate, isn't it? You can understand on the arrows that are given, isn't it? So, birth rate has decreased. It is shown by just one arrow, and death rate, two arrows are there, isn't it? So, death rate has decreased, but birth rate has not decreased remarkably. So, population continues to increase. For example, India, China, Singapore, they are falling under late expanding stage. Then fourth stage is low stationary stage. Here you will see that in this stage both birth rate as well as death rate, they are low, isn't it? Now most of the developed countries, isn't it? They fall under this low stationary stage, isn't it? So there is neither high birth rate nor high death rate, is it? Both are low, isn't it? So United Kingdom, Denmark, Sweden, Belgium, the developed countries, their population growth is taking place according to the low stationary stage. Last stage is declining stage. Now, this is the fifth stage in which the population begins to decrease, isn't it? Birth rate, you will see that it is decreasing sharply, isn't it? And the death rate, that is also decreasing, but still the birth rate is lower than the death rate, isn't it? So here in this stage the population decreases, isn't it? Germany and Hungary are the two examples given, isn't it? And presently our country, the population of our country is according to the late expanding stage, isn't it? So this is about the demographic cycle, and many times question is asked that define demography and explain demographic cycle. So according to this chart you can explain, isn't it? So this was the explanation that already I have given you, isn't it? About the 5 stages of demographic cycle, isn't it? You can go through these slides in which the explanation is given, isn't it? So whatever the red letters will show you about the exact position, you can say, of the stages. So you have to follow the sequence of this demographic cycle, isn't it? Don't change the sequence of demographic cycle, isn't it? The first stage will always will be high stationary stage, isn't it? Then second will be early expanding stage. Then third stage, late expanding stage. Then fourth, low stationary stage. And the fifth one will be declining stage. So, demographic process in which all these things are important, isn't it? Now, in this, you will see that whatever the demographic process is there, it is a continuous process, isn't it? We will see this further also, that the fertility takes place. What is fertility? That also we will discuss, isn't it? That is the ability of a person to produce child, isn't it? Then mortality, many a times there is the death of the small children also, isn't it? Then marriage is the another aspect of this demographic process, isn't it? Then social mobility in the society, isn't it? Then migration, isn't it? So it is a continuous process, isn't it? In society, this demographic process that is continuous, isn't it? Now the next important topic is about fertility, isn't it? So the definition of fertility is ability of people or animals to produce healthy offsprings. That means child, isn't it? Or we can simply say the ability of a person to produce child is called fertility. It is procreation or childbearing, isn't it? Now, this fertility rate is nothing but the actual bearing of children, isn't it? Now, in this process, both after marriage, both partners, male and female, they play equal and active role, isn't it? Of sexual contact. Now, when there is a sexual contact, isn't it? So, if there is a reproductive period of women, now the reproductive period of women is near about 15 to 45 years of age, isn't it? So, in that reproductive period, when there are when there is a sexual contact, isn't it? So, there are chances of conception, isn't it? And when there is a conception, then pregnancy occurs, isn't it? And that is nothing but the fertility, isn't it? Now, in our country, as there is a overpopulation, so to control population growth, the fertility rate has to be reduced, isn't it? And therefore, the family planning methods are adopted. So that also we will discuss later on. Now, this is the topic of fertility. So many times definition and factors affecting fertility they are asked, isn't it? So you must be able to write down at least 7 to 8 different factors on which fertility depends, isn't it? What is fertility? We have seen the ability of a person to produce child, isn't it? So that is, you can say, the reproduction, we can say, isn't it? After marriage, whatever the sexual contact is there, so the fertility rate is there, isn't it? And there is conception, the pregnancy occurs, and then there is a childbirth, isn't it? Now, the important factors which affect fertility, isn't it? Very first is age of marriage, isn't it? Now, age of marriage is also very important. In lower age, if marriages are there, so there will be high fertility rate, isn't it? Now, the female age is near about 15 to 18, and for male it is 18 to 21, isn't it? So, age is very important, which affects fertility. Other is duration of married life. Now, first 10 to 15 years, isn't it, of marriage, majority of births they can take place, isn't it? So duration of married life is very important, isn't it? The first 5 to 10 years also they are very important, isn't it? Then spacing of children, isn't it? So spacing of children means there must be sufficient gap or space between the existing child and the other child that the couple wishes to produce, isn't it? So mostly couples are advised to keep spacing of at least 3 years, isn't it? Nowadays you will find that there is a spacing of space between the two children of near about 6 years also, isn't it? Or it may be 5 years also, isn't it? So if a remarkable space is there between the two children, so that also can control fertility rate. Next factor which affects fertility is education also, isn't it? So if educated couples are there, so fertility rate is low, isn't it? And if lack of education is there, so there is high fertility rate and there is large family size also. Then economic status, isn't it? Now, economic status is also very important. So, if the person is financially sound, isn't it? So, that also has impact on fertility, isn't it? The next factor is caste and religion, isn't it? So, this also you may be knowing that in some of the caste there is high fertility rate, isn't it? Some of the low caste people also are there where there is high fertility rate. So this is also another factor, caste and religion, which affects fertility. Then nutrition. Now nutrition is also important factor, isn't it? So where the people who are following nutrition schedule, isn't it, their economic status is high, isn't it? So in that class you will find that there is low fertility rate, isn't it? Whereas the people who are poor, who are not having proper nutrition, isn't it? Or who are undernourishment, isn't it? Who are undernourishment. So in that case also you will find there is high fertility rate, isn't it? Then family planning. So regarding family planning also we will discuss in the last part of the chapter. So where these measures are there which are adopted by eligible couples, isn't it, which can reduce fertility, isn't it? So by adopting suitable family planning measures. Now regarding family planning measures we will discuss, there are so many methods which can be adopted, isn't it? So that also is one of the factor which affects fertility, isn't it? So in today's lecture we have seen the definition of demography, demographic cycle and regarding fertility, isn't it? So this is the another picture which is showing about the population of our country, and it was given in 2004 only, isn't it, in BBC News, that India's population will be the biggest in the planet, isn't it? So regarding overpopulation also we will discuss in the next lecture, isn't it? Thank you.